everybody. Let's roll, baby. Welcome in. It is a Thursday edition of East Coast Bias right here on FanDuel TV. Of course, on the Ringer Gambling Show, as Wildcard Weekend has come to a close. And now we have yet another monstrous weekend of football upon us. We have 4 divisional round games to break down. You'll have a national championship game on Martin Luther King Day, on Inauguration Day, with Ohio State and Notre Dame, that I'm sure will be the last leg, and a whole lot of money line parlays and a whole lot of teases. But the boys are fired up and ready to go. We welcome in Raheem Palmer, a very jubilant Joe House and John Jastremski. And House will start here. We'll get to your Commanders and the Lions in a little bit. But now that Wildcard Weekend has come to a close, we did not get a chance to dissect the Monday night beatdown that we saw from the Los Angeles Rams. And listen, I'm taking a little bit of a victory lap on this. I had a rough NFL season. I had a baller Wildcard Weekend. I'm walking around doing the McGregor walk after the Rams took care of business with absolute ease against the Vikings. Let's start with you, House. Was that game more about the Rams and the pedigree of that organization and the coach and the quarterback? Or was it the Vikings maybe not being the team we thought 2 or 3 weeks ago?
So to me, it was more about the Rams. And I think that win, by the time we were convened on East Coast Bias, we had the Bundo on Monday. I think we were all in lockstep that the Rams were the side. I think we all agreed. I had them in a teaser capacity. I ended up playing them on my own ticket on the money line. And I went ahead and played an alt spread. And Dream had made a nice, compelling case for the Rams as an alt spread, opportunity there. The Rams just had offensive efficiency. The first drive of the football game really set the tone. And, that Matthew Stafford under those conditions in that environment, that's exactly the version of that Rams offense that we want. And then there was a lot of skepticism out there in the marketplace, certainly amongst the East Coast Bias boys, around Sam Darnold being able to get the job done. And he tipped us off in that Detroit game. And I think that was also a big element of why we all ended up on the Rams, Dream.
I'm going to go left on this. I'm going to say this is about the Vikings, because when I look at the Vikings, after they lost to the Rams in week 8, they have had a 7-game stretch where, sure, they won a lot of games, but they didn't play anybody. And I think this was a year in the NFL where there were a lot of bad teams, and you saw them beat the Colts, the Jaguars, the Titans, the Bears, the Cardinals, the Falcons, and then the Bears again. And none of those teams made the postseason. And then after that, they played the Seahawks. And I thought to myself, I faded this team the last 4 weeks of the regular season. They probably should have lost to the Seahawks, but you had that roughing the passer penalty. They went out there and beat Green Bay, who we learned really isn't that good. And then they completely tipped their hand, and we saw that Sam Darnold turned back into a pumpkin against the Lions. So when I dig through the season, it was just they won a lot of games in a year where there were a lot of bad teams. And then when you go up against the pedigree of Matthew Stafford and McVay, you're just in a bad spot. So I'm going to say it's more about the Vikings.
All right, guys, let's transition. Now that Wildcard Weekend has kind of come and gone, we are now a few days removed from the dust settling. House, if there's takeaway that stands out, and I don't want to spoil any of our thoughts on the divisional round games, which we're going to get to. The thing I keep coming back to, and it's a team that's near and dear to your heart, the Steelers. They're kind of stuck right in the middle of the NFL in a nutshell. I don't know what to do with it, because they're not going to do better than Mike Tomlin as their head coach. I also think there's a feeling of quote unquote staleness with that organization when you have the standards that they do, and you've gone 8 years without winning a playoff game. This is not the New York Jets we're talking about here. This is a team that's used to getting to the playoffs, winning in the playoffs, dare I say winning Super Bowls. And of all of the storylines to come out of Wildcard Weekend, I couldn't find myself more confused about what to do if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, because you're not doing better than Mike Tomlin, but at the same time, the operation kind of seems stuck in neutral. Does that make sense, House?
Of course. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the 8-year run happens to coincide with the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era. They haven't had a quarterback, a competent NFL quarterback for that entire run. And this is, in this modern NFL, if you don't have a quarterback that is capable of creating confusion in the defense, capable of hitting accurate passes downfield, capable of running the football, if you don't have a quarterback that's multifaceted, that's dynamic, you don't have anything. And this is the problem that Pittsburgh encountered over its 5-game losing streak to end the season. It didn't have anything to do with the defense. The defense can't do anything in the game script and game conditions that offense relentlessly put them in. And it was just a function of Russell Wilson to me. So I don't feel like we can really make any broad pronouncements around what the Steelers' ultimate fortunes are going to be until we know who's playing quarterback for that team. And once again, we're entering an offseason where we don't know the answer. And there are not a lot of good, potential fill-ins. I mean, you're looking at guys like Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins, I guess. I don't know. Or you're going to go in the rookie direction, but there is not a lot to choose from in terms of a quarterback solution that matches a team like Pittsburgh that is playoff ready in most other aspects, Dream.
I think Pittsburgh is facing a problem that we see many NBA teams face. The worst thing to be in the NBA is mediocre. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been mediocre since Ben Roethlisberger has retired. And they're too good to get a high draft pick in order to get a quarterback, but they're not bad enough to, put themselves in a position to be there. So it's just tough for, them to really do anything unless they bottom out. And I think we've reached a point where, similar to Andy Reid in Philadelphia, there's time for a change. And it's nothing to do with Mike Tomlin. I mean, because, there's probably 30 NFL teams that would kill for Mike Tomlin. But at this point in time, what can he do if he doesn't have a quarterback? So I think it's time for a change of pace. I mean, maybe you bottom out, you get a new head coach, do the same thing the Titans did. I mean, they got rid of Vrabel and they're in a position to reset. And, as much as it hurt to lose Vrabel, they get a chance to reset. And I think the Steelers probably need to do the same.
It's just a weird conundrum because the odds of you getting a coach that's going to be better than Mike Tomlin are minuscule. Like, look around the league, guys. There are so many crummy head coaches. The Steelers go on a coaching search, and I know they've been amazing from, Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin. Like, that's insane. Like, teams don't have that sort of sustained success with coaches. But I also can acknowledge that the last 8 years have been ugly. For their standard, it's not been what they're used to. And House, my other takeaway from these games quickly, man, if you don't have a mobile quarterback, I see all these teams, your guy Daniels, Lamar in Baltimore, Josh Allen with Buffalo. You go up and down, up and down.
Mahomes hurts. Yeah.
If you don't have a guy who can go and run around, you're just taking a major leg up that you can have in exposing and attacking a defense and throwing it down the drain. Like, don't get me wrong, I love me some Matthew Stafford. I think Jared Goff's been great. But these teams that don't have the mobile quarterback, I feel like it's a major disadvantage for them, House. I really do.
You're on the money, and this is not, again, speaking of no coincidence, it's not a coincidence that the teams that have advanced, the 8 teams that we're looking at in this divisional round are 6 out of 8 with that mobile multiplicity in terms of creating challenges for defenses, challenges for these NFL defenses that really are hard math problems to solve. It's not a rocket science kind of proposition that a quarterback that can go run like my guy Jaden Daniels when it's 3rd and 1 and the game is on the line, the ability of that dude to go get that yard with his legs because the defense cannot prepare itself for what he's capable of. It creates a mismatch that is just the advantage in this modern NFL. And it's, again, it's what Pittsburgh needs. Pittsburgh needs it. I mean, it's really, we're going to see this Rams-Eagles game is fascinating to me, and we'll talk it through. But it is kind of the only one. Depends on how you view Jared Goff and Detroit. But Stafford outside and not a mobile quarterback. It's interesting kind of a handicap.
We got a lot more coming your way. We got 4 games to break down. When we come back, we're working in reverse order because I want to start with the game of the weekend. Buffalo hosting Baltimore. Buffalo getting points against Baltimore. Can't wait for this one. The pick is in for me. See if the boys are aligned. Ravens, Bills, all the divisional round games. We got winners galore. East Coast bias. We're just getting started. We come right back. All right, boys, go time. Divisional round. We'll see if we can have as successful a divisional round as we had with Wild Card Weekend. Wild Card Weekend really did treat us well. It treated House better than all of us because his team is actually playing here this weekend, so we love to see that. Don't worry, House. We'll get to your C-words with their game with the Lions, but I want to come out guns a-blazing. The game that everybody wants to see, quite possibly the game of the year from a matchup standpoint in the NFL. It's the 2 MVP candidates. It's Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry as road favorites going into Buffalo to take on the Bills with MVP candidate Josh Allen. The Bills coming off their thrashing over Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos. Raheem, I'm starting with you. This line was at 1.5. You mentioned on the Ringer Sunday pregame last weekend, you think it's going to flip. It sure did. Baltimore now is a favorite. You're not surprised. Is that justified, though?
I am not surprised at all. And it is justified because you look at this Baltimore Ravens team, they might currently be the best team in the NFL right now. And you look at their ability to run the ball. You look at the fact that Lamar Jackson is also having an MVP caliber season. You're talking about 41 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. If you go back to that game earlier this year against the Buffalo Bills, the Ravens beat them 35-10. And the Ravens absolutely dominated the game. Derrick Henry is another element that's added to this Ravens offense, which makes them scary because, this guy had 24 carries, 199 yards, and 1 touchdown, and it feels like Ravens kind of shut it down a little early. So if that repeats, and Buffalo can't slow down the run, I don't know how they win this game. So that's the reason why it blew through the 0, and the Ravens are now favorites.
Yeah, JJ, I'm not surprised at all to see Baltimore favored and for the market to have responded the way it did when the line opened with Buffalo as a small favorite. And it goes right to the heart of what Dream just laid out. I mean, the case is that Baltimore is going to be able to run the football in a way that's superior to any other team really in the entire NFL. I mean, for sure, Philadelphia has established itself as a run-first team, and that combination of Hurts and Saquon has been effective, but no team can rival what the Ravens are able to bring to the table. And part of the challenge for the Bills, it's twofold. In the first place, the option approach that the Ravens used against Pittsburgh was unsolvable. Pittsburgh could not solve the option, and they had one kind of approach to it that the Ravens exploited and exploited and exploited. I don't think the Ravens need to run that same option against the Bills. The Bills are light up front. They had 2 linebackers that were missing in the earlier version of this game, and they should have a contribution here, something to say. But this, to me, ultimately is a personnel problem. It's not a scheme problem. I don't think that the Bills, especially when Baltimore puts their fullback Picard and they go heavy with their jumbo offensive line approach and they go heavy with 2 tight ends, there just isn't there's not a defense in the NFL that I think has an answer for it. So to me, this is a Buffalo play. I mean, a Baltimore play. But you have to acknowledge that the history of Lamar Jackson and these Ravens in the more recent, era of playoffs, they are capable of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They are capable of beating themselves. And in fact, their losses this season fit the script. They make mistakes in special teams sometimes. They make mistakes with penalties sometimes. They make mistakes with turnovers sometimes. If those elements are not part of this game Sunday night, I think Baltimore wins going away.
Okay. You kind of, in a way, made the case for the Buffalo Bills. To me, for Buffalo to win this game, Josh Allen has to be vastly superior to Lamar Jackson. I'm with you. I think Baltimore, pound for pound, is a better team. I think they're a more well-rounded team. I think they're a better coach team. I'm going to take John Harbaugh over Sean McDermott in a big game any day of the week and twice again on Sunday. Now, I do acknowledge all of that by saying they matched up in the divisional round a long, long time ago, back in 2021. COVID year, weird season. Third of the people were in Orchard Park, New York. Lamar Jackson could not have played worse in that game. The Baltimore offense could not have played worse. So, House, I've been burned by the Lamar Jackson postseason demons. I was last year in the Kansas City game. I was in that Buffalo game a few years ago where I was all over the Ravens grabbing the points. But you know what's different about the Ravens this year than those prior years? They got Derrick Henry. And you know what? The Buffalo Bills have a Derrick Henry problem. You look at Derrick Henry against Buffalo, historically speaking, Raheem, he runs all over him. He did it earlier this year. You referenced the matchup. You go back to when he was with the Tennessee Titans. The Buffalo Bills couldn't stop Derrick Henry. So I agree with the market move. I know I have the potential to have massive egg in my face if Josh Allen goes and wipes the floor of Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying that can't happen. It can. I'm going with the better coach. I'm going with the better team. And I got my guy Derrick Henry right alongside Lamar Jackson, Raheem. I'm taking Baltimore minus 118 on the money line. Let's go, Ravens.
So with Derrick Henry, I kind of compare it to Terrell Davis with John Elway. John Elway didn't get over the hump until he had Terrell Davis. Now, he may have Derrick Henry this weekend. He may not have Zay Flowers because Ian Rappaport announced 2 hours ago that Zay Flowers was not at practice today. And to not be at a Wednesday practice for a playoff game, it is very concerning. So how does that impact your handicap on this game? Because
it's a great question, Raheem. It's a great question. I'll tell you what helps Baltimore here. They have two outstanding tight ends. And I think we've seen what likely. They don't use them all the time, but when they need them, last week against the Steelers, week 1 against Kansas City, he's there for Lamar Jackson. I also was impressed. Guys like Bateman and Aguilar made plays. I know Zay Flowers is a stud. He also dropped a ton of big passes last year when I needed him in the AFC title game against Kansas City. I think Baltimore has enough offensively to survive the loss of a very talented player. I'm almost at the point where I'm looking at this game and capping this game and saying, I don't think he's going to play. I'm assuming he's out, to be honest with you.
I'm fine with it. And in fact, you're walking me right into one of the markets that I think we ought to be, investing in, which is Jackson unders across the board in terms of a passing attack. The pass completions is 18.5. The pass attempts is 28.5. And passing yards is 220.5. I'm under on all of those things because I don't think that that's going to be the element of Baltimore's success. I don't think it needs to be. There is an incredible number out there. If you go back and look at the Baltimore passing attack in this first game against the Bills earlier this season, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and I can't remember the other guy, had 4 targets for that entire game. Not receptions amongst those 4 receivers, targets. And that is everything for this Baltimore team. They don't need it. It will be an element of keeping the Buffalo defense on its toes. They are going to play action. I think it's just going to be a really conventional slugfest, win the line of scrimmage kind of approach by Baltimore. And so the Zay Flowers thing is of no consequence to me whatsoever.
So for me, I do worry that it makes them slightly less explosive. And let me take that back. I do worry it can make them slightly less explosive. And just a small downgrade can be the difference. And that concerns me, especially when you consider, Lamar Jackson's history in the postseason. And when I watched that Pittsburgh Steelers game, Steelers were a player two from getting back in it. And this is Josh Allen at home. And as poorly as he performed on the road earlier this year, it's hard for me to expect that same performance. So I do like the Ravens in this game, but it's not a massive bet. And, it's something I want to think about. You'll hear more about my opinion on the Ringer pregame show on Sunday. But I think if I'm going to play this game, I want to play things that I believe are correlated with the Ravens win. That's Derrick Henry over 96.5 yards, because they're not going to win this game if Derrick Henry doesn't go off.
Not getting there without that. Totally agree, Raheem. Not getting there without that. I like that. So find permutations that work to a Ravens outcome and go from there. Total, Raheem, 51.5. Any interest?
Ooh. I think the thing that makes this tough is that we all expect the Baltimore Ravens to run the ball heavily. But at the same time, I think you have two explosive offenses. And I mean, we do know that, the Zay Flowers absence could limit some explosiveness, but, the models are putting this game over. Like, I have this way over, but this is a postseason game. So I probably would lean under, but I don't have anything on the total right now.
House?
Yeah, my inclination is under, just because, you put this game outdoors up in Buffalo. We think that Baltimore is going to try and control time of possession, try and control. Now, the thing that would submarine that is if Baltimore gets explosive running plays if Derrick Henry goes out and runs, with his first touch for another 90-yard touchdown at the beginning of the game, then that puts the total in jeopardy. But at this stage, with these teams, even with as explosive as they are, I think the pathway to success, certainly for Baltimore, will be to try and control the game on the ground. So my inclination would be an under.
I like the Ravens. It seems like, Raheem, you lean towards the Ravens. House, gut feel right now, if you had to pick a side, Baltimore?
Definitely Baltimore. Yeah, I have Baltimore in the Super Bowl, so.
You do. I forgot about that future that you made a few weeks ago. That is looking rather wise at this particular point in time. So it seems like the East Coast Bias boys, for the marquee monster game of the divisional round, are all on the same wavelength. Baltimore gets it done in Buffalo. We got a lot more coming your way. We got 2 games to break down on Saturday, and we'll try to figure out what big underdog is more likely to go and give a number 1 seed a whole lot of trouble. Is it CJ Stroud and that resurgent Houston Texans defense that was good to me last week? Or is it Joe House's upstart Washington Commanders? We got you covered. East Coast Bias right here. Ringer Gambling Show, FanDuel TV. Coming right back. House, I know this is going to be tough for you because you can't contain your excitement to talk about your football team playing in the divisional round, but I got to be that guy. I want to stay on track here. We'll go with the AFC game first since we're in the, Allen, Jackson. We might as well get Mahomes and Stroud in there, where, by the way, we have the exact same divisional round with the 4 teams. Not the same matchups, but the same 4 teams we had a year ago, except this time around, it's Houston playing Kansas City, not Houston playing Baltimore. Raheem, Kansas City has not played a game where guys have played since Christmas Day. Let's just think about that for a minute. There were Sunday games in Week 17. The Chiefs had their feet up. Week 18, there were games played. Nobody of significance played for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Denver waltzed their way into the postseason. Last week, Kansas City on bye. So I get the idea that Andy Reid is experienced off the bye. The Chiefs are experienced dealing with the bye. But this is a different monkey wrench for them, with even more time being thrown in because of the wonky, quirky scheduling. Is that a concern for you with the Chiefs this week?
No, it's not a concern because the Chiefs have been there and done that already. That's not my concern. My concern is that Houston defense. And You're looking at a team who is top 5 in sacks. You're looking at a team which is, top 5 in EPA per play and success rate. I'm very concerned with how the Chiefs blocked them. And if you look at that first game, the Texans were in it until Tank Dell suffered that injury. So I think that is a game, that's the part of the game that concerns me for the Chiefs.
Fair enough. Okay, so the Texan defense embarrassed Justin Herbert last week. They had relentless pressure on him. They forced Herbert into 4 interceptions. And House, listen, that Kansas City left tackle, right tackle leaves a lot to be desired. However, we've seen with the Chiefs in the past, this is a team that, yes, in the regular season, is around. At times, it looks like they're going through the motions. Maybe they're disinterested, but they crank it up another notch and another level come playoff time. Offensively speaking, they played a good game against the Houston Texans. They played a very sound game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Where do you stand on this Chief offense going into this game? Are they the team that was a mess for a good chunk of this year? Or are they the team that found it over the last 2 weeks?
I like the way that they looked over the last 2 weeks, because those games really reflect to me those games were games that had stakes, right? They wanted to win the 1 seed so that they could get this rest that they achieved. And Dream's point is the right point. When these teams played back on December the 21st, it was close. It was a 1-point game in the third quarter when that Tank Dell injury occurred. And I do think your point, JJ, about the rotating deck chairs on offensive line is a reason for concern. But with all of this time, there's no franchise I trust more to have a game plan, a scheme that will try and take advantage of what Houston wants to do. And I'm not laying all those points. I'm just telling you right now, it's too many points for me. I'm not comfortable with it. It's not the way that the Chiefs have won this season, and it's not kind of their way. 8.5, the line was 3.5 back in December. 8.5 is too many, but for sure, the Chiefs are the right side, and I'm going to be loading up on a bunch of like Mahomes props, and looking at the Kelsey props are all everybody. This is the whole point of Travis Kelsey. It's right now. It's Saturday. Him coming out, so I'll be in those markets, but I'm not laying all those points in this game.
It's a hefty spread. No question about it. It is a hefty spread. And Raheem, 2 years ago, now Mahomes got hurt in the game, and that was a whole subplot, and that was kind of the back and forth 2 years ago in the divisional round. But it felt like Houston is playing the role of Jacksonville 2 years ago, where Jacksonville was kind of this upstart, big dog. The game was ugly. You never got the sense that Kansas City was going to lose. But you also wondered, is Kansas City going to go and put them away? And long story short, Jacksonville covered that game. Kansas City won. Do you see a script that follows that exact same path here, where it's ugly? Kansas City's going through some things. They're never going to sweat. They won't cover, but they'll find a way to win. Is that how this game plays out?
That's exactly how I see it. If you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, since they lost that Christmas Day game to the Las Vegas Raiders last season, they've won 21 games. 17 of them have been by 1 score. So they aren't putting teams away at all. And I don't see how that changes against this Texans defense unless CJ Stroud turns the ball over. And I think whatever he found at the end of the first half against the Chargers, I think that carries over, especially when you consider that before the Tank Dell injury, he was playing relatively well against the Chiefs. So I think this is a 1-score game. When I look at my model, I make this Chiefs minus 6.72. So at 8.5 on the FanDuel Sportsbook, I think you have to hold your nose and play the Houston Texans. But at the same time, I kind of want to thread the needle on this. And I think you got to put the Chiefs in some teasers.
You know what? I don't think that's crazy. Listen, it's very within reason to expect the Chiefs to come out maybe a little sluggish. Houston getting after the quarterback, making this game ugly. I mean, House, look at the total in this game. The total in this game is 41.5, for goodness sakes. Books think this is going to be a low-scoring game.
It's exactly why it's a perfect teaser leg. That's exactly the kind of circumstances that you want to grab Kansas City and push them all the way down to just winning by a field goal. One item to this handicap that's worth noting is the return of Jalen Watson in that Chiefs secondary. They haven't had him since week 7. It was a prominent absence over the course of those 10, 11 games without him on the football field. That secondary was extremely vulnerable. His return plus the extra time for Spags to prepare, for this defense to prepare, with his impact in that, I mean, that could be one where, I might be looking at, maybe some unders with the Houston team total kind of deal, because if the identity of this Chiefs team over the run that Dream just described, right? 21 wins since they lost on Christmas of last year. It's been defense. They are a defensive football team. And if they're anchored, then I really like the idea of them, squeezing the game down, squeezing the life out of Houston. It doesn't have to be a high scoring game. I think the total is about right, 41.5. But I do like the teaser is just magnificent.
Okay. Tough game. Kansas City and Houston. Very, very tough, because I don't see Houston winning the game, which usually for me is an automatic, hey, I'm not going to play you when I can't make the case that they can go and win the game, but it's just way too many points with the Chiefs. Totally get it. Okay, House, your time to shine, buddy. Your team is playing the ultimate free roll on Saturday night. This is as house money as it gets. You've won a playoff game for the first time since 2005. Jaden Daniels is a star. Twins had a great year with Kingsbury. All the feel-good stories about the resurgence of the Washington Commander franchise are valid, real spectacular. Now, the number 1 seed Detroit Lions is staring you in the face. Detroit is a powerhouse on offense. There's no getting around that. However, their defense is still beat up. And I know they played better 2 weeks ago when we saw them against the Minnesota Vikings, but major asterisk, Sam Darnold was the quarterback. The Minnesota Viking offense stunk against the Los Angeles Rams last week. So, House, your team's been a ton of fun. They've had all sorts of karma, voodoo, good juju, whatever you want to call it. Can they make this a game on Saturday night? Yay or nay?
They can make it a game, but Detroit is going to win this football game.
Well, win, okay. Will they cover the number?
I don't love it. It's a lot of points to lay with Detroit, but Detroit has demonstrated that it's capable of winning by margin. And the problem for Washington is that Detroit can own the line of scrimmage when they're on offense, because the Washington front 7 can be pushed around. And I give a ton of credit to Coach Quinn and, the entire coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. This Washington defense is a bend, don't break defense. They were able to hold the Buccaneers to 20 points, a Buccaneers offense that was top 3 in scoring over the latter half of the season and had really put up a bunch of very impressive numbers. Now, part of that was the Tampa offense, aiding and abetting its own demise, like extraordinarily untimely mistakes when they had the ball in the red zone or when they had the ball with the opportunity to go grab the game. But I just don't see Detroit committing the same kind of self-defeating, mistakes that Tampa made. And the Detroit offense, at home, where Goff is comfortable with the weapons they have on the edges with Jahmyr Gibbs, it's just too much to ask for out of this Washington defense. Washington's best chance is a game plan akin to what they had against Tampa. There were 7 total possessions for each team in that game. That's Washington's best chance, a time of possession kind of approach. That it requires conversions on 3rd down and conversions on 4th down. Washington had a 9-minute drive in the 3rd quarter that tilted the trajectory of that game. They scored a touchdown on a 9-minute drive. This Detroit defense, what they showed in terms of shutting down the middle against the Vikings, if that is what they're capable of doing, and they had all of this rest to get their guys, lined up here, I do think that they're capable of winning by margin.
So there's one constant in this game. There's one thing that we know. We know that the Detroit Lions are going to be able to score on this Washington Commanders defense. Like, I know that. That's certain to me. The question about this game is, what is the Detroit Lions defense? Because before the Minnesota Vikings game, they were getting carved up by everybody. I mean, Brock Purdy with no weapons carved them up. You look at the Bears on Thanksgiving. I mean, they probably should have won that game if it wasn't for, Matt Eberflus and Caleb Williams struggling to manage the clock down the stretch. You look at the Green Bay Packers, they carved them up. The Buffalo Bills, that game was very eye-opening. Now, the Lions did get Alex Anzalone back for that Vikings game, and he is the green dot, and that's, very key to this Lions defense, but there's question marks surrounding this Lions defense until I see otherwise. Now, as far as covering the number, outside of that week 1 loss where they lost 37-20 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Commanders haven't lost by more than 8 points this entire year. So you're asking the Lions to win by 9.5. It is kind of tough sledding, but my model does make this Lions minus 12.5. I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to isolate the Lions team total. It's at 33.5, and I know it's steep, but my model makes this 35.5, like probably around 36, to be honest with you, 35.99. I think you can safely go over the Lions team total, and I think that's another way to play as opposed to playing the Lions to actually cover this big number. But I think I would lean towards the Lions winning this. I think, Cinderella, they went to the ball, but the time is up at this point in time.
You feel like the clock is just due to strike midnight on your feel-good season, House. The problem is that Lion defense. Can you see a situation where they're up either 14 or 17 points and you're sweating out a backdoor cover? Like, I fully expect that to be the game script here, where Detroit, to Raheem's point, is going to score a ton of points. I don't think there's any way that Washington could go and slow them down, but this easily could be a 14 or an 11-point Lion lead, and you're asking a defense that's beat up, that is just not what they were early in the year, to go and cover by margin. That's my problem here, House. I think the Lions are going to win. Gut feel, I think they are going to cover. But I'm just very prepared for what I could be dealing with at the end of this game, where Jaden Daniels screws me one last time with a backdoor.
Well, the way to protect against that is to put the Lions in a teaser and push it down under a touch. Now, you're not getting the full benefit of a Wong teaser here if you're pushing from 9.5 down to 3.5, but that's okay. I think Detroit by 4 is a lot safer proposition, and one that you could feel. I think your observation about the backdoor being open is on the money, and especially you just said it. They're up 14 to, they're up 16, whatever, and Washington comes down and scores a touchdown and they win by 8. Like, the game isn't really in doubt. There's an end of game push by Washington, a prideful, offensive drive to end the thing. That's fine, but you lose your bet because the number's 9.5. I think the way to do it is in a tease or some other way, like Dream's recommending, to invest in Detroit.
Raheem, this total's outrageous at 55.5. And the total was high for Tampa and Washington last week. Went way under because of those long, 14, 15 play drives that House was talking about. You like the Lion team total? You like the game over, or is it too high for your liking?
My model makes it 60.
Well, so in theory, then you would like it then.
Yeah, in theory, but I mean, you're talking about playoff football, and I think it's tough to get there on some of these numbers when it comes to the postseason, because we know the game slows down. There's a lot more running, but I think the Lions are going to score, so I still want to isolate that team total and possibly go over there.
When we come back, boys, we got one more game to break down. The Rams, they were so good to me on Monday night. Do they have another moment in them? Going to be an awfully tough spot. We'll break down the Eagles and the Rams. Final game of the divisional round next. Finally, boys, Rams and Eagles. And I think this game is rather fascinating. I understand the spot, Raheem, is awful for LA. It's a short week. Everything going on with all the wildfires. Going to the East Coast to take on a team that smoked them early in the year. Everything is going to reference Philadelphia. However, Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, and this Ram team, there's something in the air with them, dude. There's something in the air. Am I reading too much into the juju and the karma and the voodoo that the Rams got going at this point in time? Or is that all nonsense and Philly's just way better and they got their cobwebs out and they're going to be ready to smoke them come Sunday? What's your stance on this game?
So my model makes this game Eagles minus 7.7. And it just feels like the Eagles just has this team's number. You go back to last season. They beat them 23-14. And this season, Saquon Barkley, 26 carries, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, beat them 37-20. Like, it just was a total dominance. And, it's on both sides of the ball because the Eagles can get pressure with their front four. They don't have to blitz. So you saw that if you don't have to blitz Matthew Stafford to get pressure, there's not much he can really do. And I think that's very concerning. And then you look at the fact that the Eagles, even though their offense hasn't been very good, they can run the ball all over this Rams front. So I think this is probably a smash spot for the Eagles. I am a little concerned about their offense. I don't know what it is right now, but I think this is one of those games where the Rams, they looked incredible last week, and there's still probably some value on the Eagles.
Yeah, I'm lining up here on the Eagles. That Green Bay Philly game last week threw me for a loop, and I really regret not just going ahead and grabbing the Eagles, the team that I had confidence on both sides of the ball. That Green Bay team for me was an enigma, and I just didn't know what version of Jordan Love, and I wasn't sure because of not seeing Jalen Hurts on the football field what that offense was going to look like. So to me, the Eagles took care of all of that rust, all of the, cleaning up on the offensive side of things, what it's going to be like for them. And the fact that they're back home again with that extra rest and what Saquon and that offensive line together are going to be able to do. The spot for me is just too much for the Rams. And I do think that the Eagles defense is absolutely on point, all legit, especially in this outdoor environment. You look at Stafford outdoors in these temperatures and this kind of thing. He doesn't have a ton of experience with it in recent memory. The Rams just haven't played a lot of outdoor cold games, and it's a different kind of football. And the way that the Eagles are going to be able to control the ball on offense with Saquon, with Jalen, I do think that they get the passing game going a little bit. All credit to the Rams. The Rams are incredible. What they did this season, a season where their defense was supposed to be in transition, their defense is the reason that they are in the position that they're in right now. They became a defensive football team. Their offense didn't do anything. Their offense only scored 20 points against the Vikings on short fields all day long on Monday night. Their defense is the squad that got them home. But I don't think that defense can stand up to what Philly brings. It's an entirely different class of character. And so I'm on the Eagles. I'm going to lay the points. I'm going to play some alt spread. I'm on the Eagles every which way. Saquon to run, Hurts touchdowns, the whole 9 yards, JJ.
Guys, I fully expected you both to be on the Eagles. And I expect to kind of be on an island on myself with this one. There's something off about that Eagle offense. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to phrase it. Something has been off with that Eagle passing attack that I'm fearful that if you basically go and sell out, all out to stopping the run, we'll see if the Rams can actually do it because they tried and they failed miserably in the first matchup. If they do, I want to see a negative game script here for Jalen Hurts. I want to see how he responds. Look at his passing yards in playoff games. Outside of the Super Bowl, you're talking 140, 160. 180. I like the fact that Stafford and the Rams played a cold weather game at MetLife Stadium a few weeks ago. I know it was against the crummy Jets, but it's conditions similar to what they're going to see in Philly, just they're going to be playing a much better team. I think that Ram team is going to show a lot of fight, guys. Philly might win the game. That game is going to be tight. I think the Rams will come in and give you a spirited, competitive effort. I'm taking the Rams. I'm taking the points. And I know not many people are going to like it. I'll grab them. Let's see what happens. All right, we'll come back. Best bets. Divisional round when we come back. All right, guys, before we say goodbye, we have best bets to get to. I will give you a play on the national championship game with Notre Dame getting all those points against Ohio State. Expect a lot of people throwing Ohio State in their parlays, their teases. They got their scare against Texas, and I expect that to be a big play. Quickly, 10 seconds for each of you. Raheem, Texans, Rams, Commanders. Who's the most live in their game on Sunday?
I'm going to say Texans.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. House, Commanders, Texans, Rams, most live.
Totally agree with the Texans. They were giving it to the Chiefs pretty good on that Saturday game. They had a good game plan, and that defense is legit.
Wow. I think you guys are onto something with the Texans, but I'm going with the Rams because of Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. Anyway, best bet time. House, the floor is yours. You got 4 NFL games. You got a college football national championship. Play it any which way you like. What do you got?
Yeah, so it's an absolute must to play a teaser involving the Kansas City Chiefs. So I have the Chiefs teased in a couple different ways. I was fortunate enough to grab the Baltimore Ravens when they were an underdog by 1.5 points. That line is not there now. So the other way to do this is if you believe in the Eagles, then lay the 6 and take the 6.5 down to a half point. You're asking for the Eagles to win outright and the Chiefs to win by a field goal. That's a wonderful teaser. And then I'm looking at Mahomes props. I mentioned it in my handicap of this game. Over 1.5 total passing touchdowns. This is what the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes do come playoff time. He has 31 passing touchdowns in 12 home playoff games. He's over this in 8 of his last 10 playoff games, 9 of the last 12 at home. Andy Reid with extra time. Patrick Mahomes over 1.5 total passing touchdowns.
Raheem.
I'm going to lay it with the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm going to lay the 6.5. It feels like the Rams could be the public underdog this week. So that's where I'm jumping on.
I don't like the sound of that. Guys, Baltimore. Give me Baltimore minus 116 on the money line. I think the addition of Derrick Henry is everything for the Baltimore Ravens. So I know I didn't get the best number, House, but I'm okay. Minus 116 is not going to kill me from a money line perspective. Not messing with the 1.5. Give me the Ravens outright to go and take care of business. And then, guys, I'm going to surprise you on Monday. I think Notre Dame is going to play a big game against Ohio State. I know it sounds crazy. Notre Dame has covered every single game since their loss to Northern Illinois, back in week 2 or week 3. There's something about the voodoo and the coaching job that Marcus Freeman has done, and I think they can maybe go to town on what Sarkisian and Texas were able to do in keeping that game close. I'll grab the points with Notre Dame. I think they make it a competitive national championship game when, hey, everybody is going to be throwing Ohio State into those money line parlays. That's going to do it for this edition of East Coast Bias. For Raheem, House, JJ signing off. Enjoy all the football, divisional round, and the championship. We'll be back next week. Be good, everybody.